relationships are so crucial. And one of the things that my dad taught me really early on in life was that relationships really are the key to success. Whoever said business isn't personal clearly had no idea about business, because business is all about building relationships.
Our guest today is a medical provider, peak performance consultant, national speaker, and advocate for the advancement of medicine. He's the co-founder, director of health and wellness at Nobody Studios, a rebel venture studio building 100 compelling companies in 5 years. Welcome to the show, Dr. Erik Reis.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. This is a long time coming.
I know, literally, we were just talking about this off camera, guys. I've been trying to get Dr. Erik on the show for like 3 years. It's not that he's been dogging me, but you've had a lot of changes on your side. I've moved and had changes. Our company completely rebranded. Social Chameleon is now a podcast agency, right? And at the time when we met, it was more of a media and marketing company. So we've made a lot of transitions here. You're kicking butt with Nobody Studios, which I don't even think you had founded yet when we first met. So a lot of exciting changes here. We're going to bring everybody up to speed. And I want to let everybody know for who's tuning in, whether it's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Thank you so much for being with us today. Your favorite podcast app, you're tuning in. Thank you for being here. You could tune in and connect with Dr. Erik. I'm making it super easy for you guys. It's all clickable in the show notes. So his social media is there. Website is clickable in the show notes. So I want to get right to you, right to your story. So I want to talk about, you're a functional neurologist, right? Which is good. We want to be functional, not dysfunctional, right? So
It's a great start.
Talk about your story, obviously in the medical field, and I really want to connect the dots into how you got into Nobody Studios, because I feel like they're so highly connected, and then what you're doing with startup entrepreneurs is kind of like the cherry on top. So can you bring us back to how you originally got connected into this medical space and when the dream really began?
I would honestly say it all started out when I was a kid. Like, I've always just been that super curious kid who asked my parents way too many questions, and I'm sure it was way too early for the responses that they gave me. So, bless my parents for that. But I've always been really intrigued by science, and really just by people. I think that I've always just been, curious as to what makes people tick. Why do people do what they do? And that really led me down the path of wanting to really help people for the rest of my life in whatever context, shape, or form that really looked like. So I think getting into medicine for me was an easy way to fulfill that passion. And especially getting into neuroscience was something that I've always wanted to go into because, I've played contact sports my entire life. I've always wanted to have the best brain possible. I've always been curious as to what makes people different and how we can really understand the human brain. And so I was really fortunate in grad school or in undergrad. I studied with some graduate students. I was with a neurologist who was really heavily investigating movement disorders and just kind of like weird, clinical presentations in people. And that really intrigued me and provoked the continued progress as to like, what else is there, right? And so as I moved into my career and, got done with grad school, went on to get a specialty in neuroscience as well. I was so infatuated by helping people. And what's been really unique about my career and what I've been really fortunate to have in my clinical practice has been being able to help people that haven't really been helped by traditional norms. So a lot of the patients that I started to work with were patients who've been written off by the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayos, the large institutions in the United States and around the world. And a lot of people who've gone through the Western medicine space have had a lot of help, but there's also been a lot of people who haven't been able to find answers. And those are the patients that usually would end up in my offices. And so being able to give somebody their life back has been something that's been super fulfilling for me. And one of the reasons why I not only have my own clinic, but also too, one of the reasons why I really joined forces and became one of the co-founders with Nobody Studios. It's really allowed me to not only clinically have that component to be able to help people structurally, neurologically, metabolically, emotionally, spiritually, right? But to be able to use that knowledge clinically and take that to the real world and to create companies to help startups, founders, entrepreneurs, insiders who want to take their ideas that might sound crazy, that might sound so big and so far down the road, to be able to provide them the opportunity to take that idea and formulate it into a true business is something that I think is super cool, something that I wish somebody would have done for me early on. And I hope to spend the rest of my life being able to do that, because I really truly believe that the best businesses and startups have yet to be created.
That's incredible, man. You just give us a lot to kind of chew on there. So I want to dissect it a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
So first of all, you had this dream as a kid, and your parents kind of were like, "All right, look, oh, here's Erik. He's got this big." But I'm sure they sounds like they supported you in a way that
Yeah.
led you down the right path, which is cool. And then, so when you went to college, you immediately knew you were going to be into neuroscience, and that was the space you wanted to kind of tackle. Or did you kind of find your way? It took you a minute to find your way?
To be honest with you, I think being a patient first and then a doctor second and an advocate third has really dictated my path in life, right? So playing contact sports most of my life, soccer and hockey, football as they would call it over here in London,
Yeah.
has really kind of given me a different perspective. Something about my personal life that I'm willing to share is like I have problems where I will struggle with like intermittently losing consciousness and blacking out. Something that I
How
didn't
many
sign up
times do you
for.
think you've had, have you had noted concussions, or you just know you've had them that maybe a
This is the
doctor didn't
kicker.
tell you? Yeah.
Yeah, this is the kicker with it. I've never had a formal concussion. Have I had hits to the
Okay.
head? Yeah. Have I, been checked into the boards? Have I headed the ball multiple times? Have I had accidents? Absolutely. But I've never had, a documented concussion. And this is where the
Hmm.
research is really lagging, and where the real world disconnect is kind of coming into play is that a couple of things. One, on average, it takes about anywhere from 12 to 17 years for a research article to come out and be public knowledge, meaning that today, if a research article was published today,
Right.
it would take an average of 12 to 17 years for that information to become public knowledge. Now, most
Right.
patients, and to be honest with you, nobody really has that time to wait 12 to 17 years for something to come out today to be
Well,
used into clinical
it's
practice,
a
right?
little
So there's
sore
a large
subject too when we're
disconnect.
talking about what's going on with the pandemic and medicine with that and the vaccine and
Absolutely.
stuff. Like, I
100%,
don't want to
right?
go
And that's
there. I really don't want to go there. But it's one of the things I heard is that it's usually 5 to 12 years before we know what can
yeah,
really go into it. So
yeah,
that's kind of common in medicine, is that it takes many
yeah,
years to study it, to seek, because effects to the human body don't show up
yeah.
today or
Well,
or tomorrow. It takes years to really get that information.
and that's the reality of it too. And so, taking that into context as well, a lot of information has really changed. A lot of guidelines have changed with concussions and even mild traumatic brain injuries, which is the fact that you don't need to have a formal diagnosis to be diagnosed with one. You don't necessarily need to see things on MRIs or CT or diagnostic imaging. To be honest with you, they're actually relatively poor at being able to diagnose trauma to the brain unless you have a tumor or a brain bleed or something very apparent that's going on that can be clearly seen. And so,
Can we pause on that, Dr. Erik? Do you mind if we pause on that? Because I actually had a couple head injuries myself. I did not really play contact sports. I played baseball growing up, and I played, which, I guess you can have a collision, but I played tennis also. So not a lot of injuries happening there. But I live in Buffalo, as you know. I grew up in Buffalo, and we got a lot of ice on the roads, on the sidewalks,
yeah,
and on the driveways. I actually had 2 injuries due to ice, and I just want to kind of walk you through one. The reason I'm going to share this story with you right now is so we can help our audience, because anybody who's maybe had a head injury and didn't get it looked
yeah,
at, I want them to know like what the proper steps right away would be, because maybe someone's listening to this now and they have they're playing a sport or something happens, and they want to know what to do. So that this information can really help them. So my story was, I was in a band at the time. I was about probably 22 years old. I was wearing, I was going out to play a show. I think it was Kent State area in Ohio. We were stopping up at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame during the day, and we're playing this kind of college show at night. So I remember I was wearing like, my favorite outfit, whatever. I know people are going to be there hanging out. And I had these like kind of dress shoes on that I wore when I played. And so they were like super slick shoes. And it was like a February cold, icy day. And I remember our guitarist that we used to practice at his house, his driveway was blacktop and it was downhill. I remember in my hands, because I was going down this driveway, I had some gear in my hands. I had a book
of
bag. I think
course.
I had a pillow because we had like I don't know, 4 hour drive or 5 hour drive, something like that. So I had kind of a pillow because I knew I was going to be cooped up in the back of this van. And as I'm going down the driveway, dude, I just slipped, completely wiped out, feet underneath me, and it was a direct hit on the back of my head.
Yeah,
And I actually could not move I got winded. I did not black out. If it was for a split second. But I felt the thump of the back of my head hit, which was super scary. I felt like I couldn't really defend myself because I had stuff in my hands. So the quick slip, things in my hands, I didn't have the ability to really catch my rear end falling backwards. So my head thumped, my arms just went completely paralyzed, like for the moment, and I was so winded from the thump that it literally felt like it took me a minute, maybe it was 30 seconds to catch my breath. And I remember thinking, all of my buddies are down this hill and kind of around the bend and hanging out in the basement. They're having breakfast. One of the girlfriends made breakfast for everybody, which is cool. And I'm like not kind of just not able to do anything. I didn't know if I was paralyzed forever. And now that I watch a lot of football and I see when a guy gets hit and they lay there, I know that feeling now. At the time when I've seen concussions growing up, I didn't really understand what it's like to just be kind of laying there and not being able to help yourself up. But I experienced it, and I didn't handle it right. I was 22 years old, like I said. It's very stubborn, and we've been looking forward to going to Cleveland like this entire, through the summer we talked about, and it's finally like happening. It's the winter time. So when finally collected myself and went back down and talked to the guys, they were kind of joking about it, like, "Oh, you fell on your ass, haha." I was like, "No, like I got knocked out, kind of like." My arms couldn't move. And then they're like, well, you seem to be moving fine. I'm not trying to say that they were being jerks about it, but I think they just figured, oh, Mike's fine, well, let's just go play the show. So when I went to play the show later that day after traveling, my back was super sore and everything. I used to do a drum solo quite a bit towards the end of the show. So I was playing, everything was fine. The songs came to me. But I noticed my sticks, I wasn't able to grip my sticks. So if you guys are listening, you might not see this, but obviously you're not seeing Erik right now, but he's smiling because he knows. He's smiling because he knows that my hands couldn't grip the sticks right because I had this head injury. And during the drum solo, it was the craziest thing. I almost couldn't grip them at all. I had like 2 fingers on my drumsticks, and normally I have these fingers wrapped around the bottom of the stick.
Yeah.
For grip. And so I did my drum solo. The guys really didn't know any differently, but I was really freaking out. I'm like, am I gonna be able to continue to play drums? Am I gonna feel like this forever? So the good news is I kind of over time healed. But I didn't report it to a doctor or anything. Sounds like I didn't have a brain bleed because it would have been a lot worse. But I have had some cognitive things. And then another time I slipped on my parents' driveway, which was slanted, and I just kind of fell sideways and hit the side of my head. So it wasn't the direct blow in the back, which I know is like the worst spot you can hit your head. And that just kind of rattled me for a moment. I don't know that it was a concussion, but I certainly that first time was. In that situation, if it's anybody else, what could I have done differently or maybe help the situation?
Yeah. I think you said something that's really important that I think we need to kind of bring up to the forefront is that, it's really interesting when I ask people this question, and more importantly, when I ask patients as to like, have you had a concussion? They're like, no. And then all of a sudden later in the story, they're like, oh, but I had my bell rung, or oh, I hit my head, or I lost consciousness. But that's the distinction, right? And so even when I was playing hockey in sports in high school, it's like you had a concussion. Well, if you come back out, you're through it, you're good. Like you just go and you keep rolling, right? Like the game has
Your
vastly
adrenaline too.
changed.
You got that adrenaline going. I kind of had that because I wanted to play the show, but in a game, especially if it's like a championship or playoff game, people just want to throw
Yeah.
themselves back in the game. It's super dangerous. So
Athletes are the worst though too, because we always want to say we're good to
stubborn.
go. We can override it and we can push through, right? So
Well,
that's
yeah,
always the
because also
factor.
a coach can take you out of the game and you may not play against someone replaces you in the NFL or NHL. If you get taken out,
Yeah.
that's your livelihood. That could be someone
Yeah.
comes in, plays better than you for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden you don't have your roster spot anymore. So it's
Right.
people's
And that
livelihood.
doesn't make it
Doesn't make it
right, but
right.
there's definitely emotions behind
I
that
think
for
that's
sure.
the
And I think
explanation behind people's emotions. But going back to the story, so based on what I experienced, that was clearly a concussion, right?
I would say so, yeah. And here's what the research is kind of showing for right now. Yes, you do need to rest in some way, shape, or form, right? So if you are diagnosed or you feel as though you have a head hit, like you need to rest. Like your brain needs to recover. There's an inflammatory cascade that occurs. There are changes that occur in the brain, the gut, the body. I mean, there's a lot that's going on structurally, neurologically, and even metabolically. So you need to rest, but you need to rest only for a specific period of time. I mean, give it, maybe a couple days, maybe up to a week. Worst case scenario, up to a week and a half or 2 weeks. But the old school thought process of just resting until all of your symptoms go away and you can come out of that black room and you can finally get back to reality. Those are actually different. It's actually not like that anymore, because what we now know is the earlier that we can get you moving and being cardiovascularly active, that's not saying to run a marathon, but literally just like up, walking around, elevating your heart rate a little bit, giving you some resilience with regards to your cardiovascular system. The quicker we can do that, the more efficiently and the more effectively, and the quicker you actually recover from your head injury or concussion. Now,
So maybe it
that
was
doesn't
good I
mean
played the show then. I don't know.
yeah,
Because I
maybe it
played
was good to play the show, but I would say you probably still need to rest and then probably get checked out by a doc who knows what they're doing, right? So, because
yeah.
here's the kicker with that, right? The brain will recover in some way, shape, or form, but the brain's really good at compensating, right?
Hmm.
Like there are pro athletes who I've seen who will literally tell me like, I need to run 2 or 3 yards before I can take a sharp right turn, or I can't do this, otherwise I'll get a headache. And then they make it work, right? They compensate, and that's what's amazing about your nervous system. But that's also maybe a potential limitation down the road, or maybe 10, 15 years later now you're like, why am I forgetting words? Or, oh yeah, I feel like I'm off balance, right? Or yeah, maybe now I have like weird like immune issues, or foods that I used to eat like don't sit well with me anymore. And it's like, well, why would that be? Well, maybe it's aging, maybe it's genetics, but we also know too that there's this heavy integration with your gut and your brain and just all of this functionality with the food that you put in your body, how well you sleep, your physicality, and then more importantly, like just, how much you really push your brain and are challenging yourself and growing. And so there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to be said about it. But what I would tell anybody who's dealing with that stuff is, find a doc who knows what they're doing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have all the credentials. They just have to be able to critically think through that, because I think one of the biggest frustrations that I had in medicine, in clinical practice, was that medicine as a whole has tried to put people into a category, right? You're a square peg getting fit into a round hole. If you have this diagnosis, well, it's either yes or no for what we should do with you. But people aren't binary, right? Brains aren't binary either. So we have to understand that every person needs to have an individualized approach, just like every business has to have an
Yeah.
individualized approach. And that's just the
Right.
reality
Too
of
much
it.
cookie cutter. I've had a couple experiences at the doctor where I left and I was like, I think I know more than they do about it, because I spent
It's frustrating.
time going into it, researching it, and they're just like, give you the kind of 3 word or 3 sentences that they give everybody, like do this, do that, and see me in 2 weeks. But what I want to do is we're going to take a quick break in a minute. Before we do that, I just want to hang on this. So. Um, I do notice that my brain kind of thinks faster than my tongue can sometimes articulate what I'm saying. And I notice that obviously doing podcasting and doing many of these interviews, sometimes I'll be thinking of a thought right away and I'm excited to say it, and the tongue is kind of like slow getting there.
Yeah.
But I think that that's tied to it. I really do. Now, does that mean that having that head injury or the multiple that I did, is it something that can get better over time, or it's basically either going to stay the same or regress?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the beautiful part about living, in the day and age where we're at in 2022 is the fact that we know a lot about the brain. We still don't know everything, and to be honest with you, the more I get into this, the more I really think we know anything. But here's what I can tell you: is that your brain can grow and adapt and change until the day you die. That's what allows you to acquire a new skill set or a new habit, or take up knitting or playing an instrument, even when you're in your
Hmm.
80s, 90s, right? So your brain can change. And what that means is that your functionality can change. Your ability to do things can vastly improve. Now that can be for better or for worse. Obviously, you want to push yourself towards being able to be better at something, obviously not being worse. So yeah, you can overcome those things. It's just understanding, what areas of the brain are working well, what areas aren't working well, and then metaphorically speaking, like what can you do to update your software? Maybe for
Hmm.
your speech issues, maybe that means you should continue to speak more. Doing a podcast might be very therapeutic for you, but
Hmm.
singing could also be therapeutic for you too, because singing, yes, it involves speaking and speech and having different, vocal intonations, but it involves a different area of your cortex. It involves more of your right brain than it does your left brain, which is your left brain's more for like reading and just speaking in general. So combining those circuits together might give you more strength. It might give you more resilience. You might be more effective or more efficient at being able to do things. And so that's kind of the difference. And that's one of the things that I really notice with patients too, is they come in with these diagnoses and I'm like, okay, well, let's see what works. Let's see what doesn't work. let's get really specific at what we can do to try and help you update your software. And then I'm really keen on sending people home with therapies. And that was really a major focus for me clinically, and why I love having a clinic in Minnesota is that I still see patients, people flying from all around the states to come see us. And, we do as much as we can to help them get back to their life, because that's what I hope somebody would do for me if I needed to get put back together.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we don't overlook that. That's something I love to hear that. I've had other doctors on the show before that are very similar to yourself in that it's all about the individual care of the patient.
Yeah.
and taking care of them, making sure they're taking care of them like a brother or sister or father or mother. Like they're getting primo. I'm not just putting you in with everybody else, lumping you in with, I've seen 100 people with the same problem. So that individual care, that approach, it's just great. It's refreshing to hear. And so I want to make sure that I give you some love for that. I know you weren't looking for the pat on the back, but I do appreciate that. That is why people come out looking for you. And that's probably why it took me 3 years to get you on the show, because you're so busy. I know you're in London right now, so we want to talk about that. We're going to take that break right now. Give some love to our sponsors. We'll be right back with Dr. Erik Reis.
Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, it's Mike. I'd like to give a proper shout out to Navigator Bookkeeping. Look, for a long time, I ran my business without really understanding the full financial picture. I used my gut and my bank account balance to make decisions, which led to some poor choices and constant stress over my business's finances. I knew something needed to change. At the beginning of 2021, I made a decision that helped pave a more clear path for my business. I started working with Navigator Bookkeeping. Since then, my bookkeeping has been handled for me. I now understand the full financial story of my business, making important financial decisions much easier now, and it helps me plan for where my business is going. I highly recommend giving Navigator Bookkeeping an opportunity to help your business. Check them out at navigatingyourbooks.com. Again, that's navigatingyourbooks.com. It's time to know the full financial story of your business.
All right, we're back in action with Dr. Erik Reis. You guys can connect with him again on social media. All those links are clickable in the show notes, as well as his website, to make it super easy to connect. Right before the break, we were talking about the potential of our brains and being able to do some activities that can help strengthen the brain and continue to grow it over time. It's one of those muscles, right, that we can keep strengthening over time, which is really exciting. And we're talking about the concussion situation, but I wanted to move to that second part of the story. Talk about how you came in to a space that already had 100 years plus research, and you kind of put your own spin on it. Were you getting a lot of, maybe backlash is too strong of a word, but did a lot of people kind of in the medical space not like that you were doing that?
What's really interesting about what I do is it's all clinical neuroscience, right? So this is all research that's published. These are double-blind, placebo-controlled studies that are validating, different circuits in the brain, different therapies. Looking at, we'll put it this way: they're looking at complex areas of the brain, but really breaking it down simplistically to understand rehabilitation. So I'm not doing anything that anybody else hasn't done, right? I'm just applying it's very specific. I'm really keen on putting it together with nutrition and lifestyle changes. And really the biggest thing for me is educating patients. I think that's been a really essential point that I've really focused on, because that's not only been really good for, getting really good results, but I want these people to be able to live the life that they want to live. And that means that they're not seeing me, right? So yes, I'll always be there, but nobody wants to see a doctor 2 times a week or 1 time a week for the rest of your life. Like that's a jail sentence. So I think providing that individuality and that freedom to be able to live their life is huge. And so one of the big frustrations that I took away from clinical practice was that most patients don't even have the fundamental knowledge to ask the baseline questions to even get the answers that they're looking for. And that's really a failure of medicine as a whole. And we have to own that as doctors, as providers, but then also too, that's one of the reasons why, I really started moving into the startup space is because, creating companies that can educate patients, that can empower patients to own their health, creating applications, wearable integrations that can know patients better than their doctors do, right? And really help them understand what's going on with themselves to maybe, get care, where they're at, which is probably on their device or somewhere on the web. Can we create those things and really help challenge and change the narratives in medicine? I really believe that we can. And that's why, being with Nobody Studios and, talking to a lot of startup founders and people who are really intrigued by this space has been eventful because I love taking ideas and turning them into reality. And so that's really been, a big motivator for me in shaping my career and taking it to where it's at right now.
Bam, there's that mic drop moment we were talking about right there off camera. I'm like, dude, you're going to drop some fire today. And you just did. You put a big bow on it. You kind of tied everything we were talking about previous to the power of Nobody Studios. I want you to continue on that. So we talked about in 5 years, helping launch over 100 different, is it companies? 100 different companies, right? That's huge. I mean, that's difficult to do for extremely large organization, and you guys kind of created this brainchild, no pun intended, with the conversation, but in a couple short years into what it is now. I think it's tremendous. Give some love to your team, whoever you want to properly, who's helped support you, get their name out there, and talk about really the vision, because you talk about what you're doing, but I want to hear about the vision of, because you guys are thinking bigger than this already. So
Yeah, we are.
Bring
We're
us
really
up to
pushing the
speed
envelope.
on Nobody Studios.
Yeah, so Nobody Studios is a rebel venture studio. We're focused on creating 100 compelling companies in 5 years. And when a venture studio is essentially the unique combination of like venture capital and incubation. So what we do is we are finishing up a fundraising round right now, and we utilize that capital that we fundraise to deploy to founders, co-founders, startup artisans who have ideas who want to take them to the market. What we essentially do is we de-risk early stage startup development. So the first 18 to 24 months, for those of you who are startup founders, know that that's where all the risk is, where all the uncertainty is, and where a lot of the questions are that don't necessarily have answers. And so that's difficult. But what's also beautiful about that early stage is that that's where a lot of value can be created. That's where a lot of the foundations need to be established, and where a lot of leadership teams can really be successful. And with the amazing team that we have at Nobody Studios, I mean, Mark McNally, our CEO, is absolutely brilliant, skilled in his own right, multiple startups, multiple billions of dollars in exits under his belt. Barry O'Reilly, just an amazing, amazing individual who takes critical thinking and innovative thinking to a completely different level. The rest of my team members, I mean, Tiffany Hansen, Brendan Weaver, Kiara Burns. I mean, we have just an all-star cast of people on our team that, I've absolutely outkicked my coverage with. I mean, I learned so much from them. And what's been really fun with this organization is that we are creating companies faster than ever. I mean, we have 11 companies in the hopper right now that we'll be launching in 2022 alone. As we continue our fundraising efforts, we'll probably be launching even more next year. And we've got people from, Fortune 100 companies who are investors, who are on our hospitality boards. We have people who are, leaders in health and wellness and modern medicine who are joining us and becoming investors, but also helping us create companies. I mean, what's really cool about this is we're attracting some really, really elite talent that there's no way we could ever pay an hourly rate for their services. They're literally unemployable. And that's what's been fun is they're here for the right reasons. Yes, they have financial interests in the studio for having companies go and be scalable and growable, but they're like kids in a candy store who literally want to ideate and innovate in their own spaces. And so what's fun about that is bringing these titans from the industry who have all this experience and all this knowledge that they want to share, combining that together with like young, hungry entrepreneurs who have ideas, who want to bring them into the studio market to say, hey, I maybe never done this before. I don't have the resources to do this. We can strap on the leadership, the marketing, the tech stack, the branding, the experience to help you take that idea and turn it into reality. And that to me is super fun because not only are we going to help people like manifest and create, like bring their dreams to reality, but we get to help people in the process. And that's the big why for me is, yeah, I want to make money. Of course, we want to have exits and all that stuff sounds fun, but I want to scale my ability to help as many people as possible because I don't know how much time I have left, right? Nobody does. And I think that this is something that we have to just come to grips with is like, nobody knows what your timestamp is. So how big of an impact can you have, and can your impact really outlive you? That's something that I'm really keen on, because I've been fortunate to have amazing mentors in my life, and I hope to continue that process, because I truly believe that leaders cultivate and create future leaders. And we're really keen and focused on doing that as a studio.
That's awesome. And it sounds you're kind of leading me up your little alley-oop moment, setting me up for my next question, talking about a little bit of your legacy, talking about, hey, man, I'm not thinking about doing something 25 years from now or starting to think about what retirement would be like. I'm thinking about right now, how much impact can I make in the moment? You're a young guy. I'm doing it in like right now. I'm not going to wait till tomorrow to start. And a lot of the people you're working with have that mentality. And so it sounds like you got the right group of people around you.
Yeah.
And you joked and said you outkicked the coverage. I love that. You got people who are, experts in their own field. You have your gifts and talents and superpowers. Everybody has their own. Collectively, you come together as a team. I think it's really important for our younger entrepreneurs to realize every great company and every great person in business does have a team around them, whether it's coaches, it's a board of directors, it could be just a mastermind group. If you're a solopreneur, maybe you're a coach, you are the business, you're the only person in the business. Well, you still can have a mastermind group. So I think it's really cool that you gave love to the people around you that have helped you really turn this concept into a reality. And my question to you is this. Imagine for a moment that you're the author and protagonist in your own life story, and you get to write the ending, and God willing, you continue to live a long, prosperous life. You're looking back on it, you're reflecting on it, and you get to define your legacy. What would that be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, I think my legacy wouldn't necessarily revolve around me. Like, I don't care about my name being thrown out there, propagated, or having my name posted on like a school or like a new wing of a college or whatever. Well, what I care about is that in some way, shape, or form, I had a positive impact on the people that I came to encounter with. Right. I think that relationships are so crucial. And one of the things that my dad taught me really early on in life was that relationships really are the key to success. Whoever said business isn't personal clearly had no idea about business, because business is all about building relationships. And whether those are mentors, coaches, guides, or whether they're people underneath you who you're mentoring too, there's so much to be learned about those relationships. And so that's been a key thing for me in the clinic with my patients, with my colleagues at the studio, building and scaling companies, talking to investors, and just honestly just meeting super cool people. I hope that I can just continue to be in rooms where we're talking about innovative, big thinking style conversations. And I really hope I'm never the smartest person in the room, because if I am, I'm in the wrong room.
Yeah,
So
it's tough for you though, man. When you're in a room, you gotta really find some other brainy individuals, because I know they're out there. I love it, man. You're very humble. I appreciate you being humble and cool about that. But you gotta give yourself some love too. I know you do. I think that's really well said as well. Like, you're not looking for the name on the building or huge Wikipedia page necessarily, but you really want to know that the impact is through the people that you've worked with, whether it's the startup entrepreneur or someone that business now has impacted, which is really cool. And you start to think about, like, when you help somebody launch a business, you're literally not just helping that one person. It's clients, customers, people in the organizations, people you've changed their lifestyle forever, right? We don't think about that. We kind of think about, like, we talked about the being present in the now, which is important, but really cool to see the impact that comes from it. And something I want to remind you is you're already doing it. Like, you got, did you see 11 companies in 2022 that are up and off the ground already?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's incredible. That's
Yeah.
I mean, that's like one a month. That's wild.
It's
Those
been
are
a fun ride. We'll put it that
crazy
way.
numbers. I know you have to run, and so do I. So I want to make sure I'm mindful of that. With the last 2 minutes here, think about the entrepreneur that's tuning in right now. They may have started their business already, or they're in that process of coming up with the brilliant idea that they need to turn into a concept that can either be sold to an investor, or they're going to bootstrap it and they're going to do it themselves. But they're really on the fence. They're wavering, because every idea that they've tried, they put into action and they get knocked down. You said that right there. 12 to 24 months are really the most difficult for a business. So someone who's tuning in right now, they're in the 12 to 24 month mark, and they're just about ready to, are they going to turn the lights off? But they have one last push. What would you tell that person?
Yeah. I mean, I would just tell them the only way to guarantee failure is to stop. We've had so many people who've reached out to us at Nobody Studios with, I've been, grinding for the last 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, even a couple of years, right? You can't put a timestamp on any of this stuff. You don't know when it's going to hit. And like Mark Cuban says, you only have to be right once to call it a success, right? And so most people that you see who are mega stars and all over TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn, they've struggled for decades, years and years before they finally figured it out and made it work. And so that curve is what we're looking to flatten very quickly, because with the studio model, what's nice about that is that you might give up some equity in your company, but I'd much rather have 30 or 40% equity of a company that actually takes off scales and grows and could be acquired versus 100% of a company that has no value whatsoever or was never even started. And so for those who are struggling and those who are going through that, like, reach out, like, find some mentors, like, find some coaches, like, find people who've been there before. And we're happy to have a conversation with you at the studio as well, too. This is one thing that I'm very keen on, is whether I can help you directly with the studio or whether I can just help you with my network and connections. I'm an open book. I hope at the end of the day, a lot of other people feel that same way for me too, because you just never know where life's going to take you. And I really believe that karma is a real thing. So I believe in digging the well before you need it. And I think that's a very good way to live your life.
I always tell everybody two things, man. Be great and be grateful. I know you live in a lot of gratitude, and it reflects in your personality. It reflects in the fact that you are excited to come on here and do this for our audience and give your time. Time is a huge asset, and so I don't take that for granted. So thank you so much. Super grateful for you, your wisdom. I know in the short period of time you were on the show today, you did drop a lot of great wisdom and things that I'm thinking about that I will apply. Most important thing that everybody tuning in can do is apply this knowledge. And again, I love what you just said there. Again, at the end, it's not about, like, if you stop, that can be considered a failure. But the guys and gals in business and the Michael Jordans of their sport or business, they've failed way more times than anybody's even tried. And Jordan has this saying, he's like, the reason that I'm successful is because I shot and missed like 9,000 times, and I was given the ball like 26 times to hit the game-winning shot, and I missed. And this and that, all the things that didn't go well for him. He goes, that's why I succeeded, because I kept going. So I love that right there. I'm going to let you run, Dr. Erik Reis. Thank you so much. Where's the best place to find Nobody Studios if people want to tune into the content there?
Yeah, nobodystudios.com. Go to our website, check us out, reach out. I'm all over LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me on there too. And it should be pretty quick search to be able to find us.
Awesome, brother. This was incredible. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone for tuning in, especially those who listen all the way to the end to hear this message. Seriously, I appreciate you, and my guests do as well. Giving a quick reminder to subscribe to this show. It's completely free and will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are released. If you'd like to provide a tip as a gift, you can do so via patreon.com/mikedup. It's spelled MIKED up. Patreon.com/mikedup. You can give as little as $1 per month or as much as you'd like. Every dollar is greatly appreciated and completely unexpected. Appreciate your reviews and your messages coming in on social as well. Keep them coming. Your feedback is valuable and absolutely means the world to me. You can check out more episodes and content at mikeduppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, and it's at Mike DiCioccio, MikeDiCioccio. Thank you so much for your continued support. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.